And you want to talk about some threes being drained. We hope to see the Hawks trending up because, of course, the last time they played the Miami Heat, they had, we'll call it a respectable 31%, but they've actually improved quite a bit since about a month or so ago. But speaking of the Hawks and what we want to see out of them, I mentioned in the tease that you got a 2.0 here between the Hawks and the Heat. Now, last year, it was round one of the playoffs. This year, it's the first game of the play-in round. Does it hinge on Trae Young? Is he the guy who, if he goes, so goes the Hawks? Or is he the guy where it's like, maybe not as much? Recent article that came out just yesterday, Jarvis, talked about the Hawks changing everything. And we know what those changes were, right? We know the offseason shakeups. Out goes Travis Schlenk, for example. In comes Landry Fields. And the list goes on and on. Out goes Nate McMillan. In comes Quin Snyder.
Yes.
But the question has remained, from the lineup perspective, Jarvis, who's going to go in and out? And we kind of know that the reason Quin Snyder was brought in with about 22 games left in the regular season was so that he could evaluate those players and kind of determine it. But before this season, and really, Jarvis, I'll venture to say that before the back half of this season, speculating that Trae Young would be gone or that the Hawks would move on for him was like blasphemy.
Absolutely. Yes.
But after 2 years of underperforming and being 2 years removed from their trip to the Eastern Conference Finals, now that's starting to be a question that's being posed again. And so Kevin O'Connor from The Ringer, who was the most recent writer to propose that, if you will, to say that, hey, Tony Ressler and company, regardless of if Trae desires to stay or not, that decision could be made on and hinged on what they do in this play-in round or really in this postseason overall. Your thoughts?
Wow, that's a lot. Because when I used to get sad or upset when I hear about, because my guy for Yahoo Sports, the brother Chris.
Oh, Chris Haynes.
Chris Haynes, yeah, Chris Haynes had reported that Trae may request a trade, depending on how things go in the playoffs and the postseason. I was like, man, you gotta stop all that stuff, man, because we cover this team very closely, so we know we talk to different people within the organization and kind of understand and have a really good feel of what's going on with this team. But now I'm in a space where I don't mind a report of them saying, of the ownership saying, hey, if you guys want to trade him or you feel like there's something comparable or that makes sense that will get this team to where we want to be, go, by all means, go ahead. You have the green light to go ahead and do that. And I don't have a problem with that, even if it's not a space where they want to trade him or they won't trade him. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to be, everything is on the table when it comes to getting this team better and making them a contender. And I don't think nothing at this point, at this juncture, nothing needs to be left off to the table when it comes to trying to get this team better. And I think that that's something that Trae needs to understand. And that's something that I had to come to understand as well because, I really like Trae. I love what Trae has done, coming in and having all the pressure with the whole Luka Doncic thing. And then how about this too, T? Yeah. It's a little sidebar. How about the possibility of both of these guys being traded? Because Luka being traded, you know what I mean? Like, who would have thought that on draft night when this trade went down? So I think that all these things kind of come into play when it comes to Trae Young, whether he stays or goes. And I don't necessarily believe that it might be hinged on what he does tonight in this particular game. But I do believe that, the main piece right here, which is a very important one, Quin Snyder, they said that he's going to have a lot of say-so as far as how the roster is constructed. And I think that's the biggest part that was in this article. We're talking about, whether or not they're going to trade him because we know I really trust Quin Snyder from a basketball standpoint.
It was the first thing that I thought of when they hired him. And listen, this is no offense to the Hawks organization whatsoever. We kind of work for them, so I'm not about to offend them. But I will still tell the truth and try to be as objective as possible. And the first thing I thought when Quin Snyder decided to come here was, wow, legitimately, what makes this a destination versus all of the other cities and teams and franchises that were after him? Well, it makes sense that you would make him pretty much head coach basketball plus. And the plus is that he would have a real decision make, like some semblance of authority and really a voice in the room when it comes to where this team is going to go as relates to personnel decisions. Listen, this is a guy who had players like Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell, just to name a few. I mean, we could go down the whole list of his 8 seasons with the Jazz, and he continued to climb the ladder as far as
consistency was the key for him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as far as improvement in stats, we talked about it yesterday, how now the Hawks go from middle of the road to like number 2 in offensive rebounding and number 1 in second chance points since he arrived here. So he makes an instant impact, but there's one area, because of course that's on the defensive side of the ball. Now on the offensive side of the ball, I agree with you. I don't think it's going to be one game necessarily. Like if for some reason Trae doesn't play well against the Heat, meaning they trap him again and he can't figure it out,
right?
Even though he's got DeJounte Murray to help him this time.
Yeah.
Or if for some reason they don't get out of the play-in round, now that's where I think it could make a difference. Because if you don't get out of the play-in round because you're not moving the ball the way that Quin Snyder would like you to move the ball, that's going to be a challenge. Because think about it, Jarvis.
Let me add this to the T. Let me add this too. Or if he's not moving off the ball like he's supposed to, because we know that's a big thing as far as when it comes to Trae Young, as far as to whether or not he wants to, because Quinn runs a motion style offense, so this guy's moving with the ball in your hands or moving while the ball's not in your hands. We know that has been a real stickler for Trae, not outwardly, but we just looking at it on the court, he doesn't tend to want to do it consistently. And I think that's what Quin Snyder wants when it comes to implementing his offense. So I think that's going to be a big key as well.
Well, that was the point that I was making, and going back to the fact that everyone always looked at Nate McMillan and said, hey, the Hawks get caught in this half-court offense and they can't really move the ball and they stay stagnant. One of the reasons you stay stagnant is kind of because your point is dribbling the clock out. And unfortunately, sometimes when he didn't dribble the clock out, there were some ill-advised shots. So if this offense stagnates because you're continuing to dribble out the clock and you're the reason that they sort of stay in a half-court offense, then that's going to be something where you can't help but look at you because you're the field general. So you've got to be responsible for moving that ball. So while I don't think it hinges on one game, I will say that it kind of hinges on what he does in this postseason, because it's probably going to be a microcosm of what we've seen this entire season. And that's the reason I think that it could very well hinge on what goes on here. And I think it's been a shift, because what our guy Chris Haynes was reporting was more on the side of Trae requesting a trade. I think what Kevin O'Connor and others have spoken about more recently is the organization making a trade and deciding they
might not want you.
That's where I think we are now. That's exactly where I think we are now. But John Collins, on the other hand, might have something else to say about that, because in a conversation that he had with our guy, Brandon Scoop,
friend of the show,
he of Valley Sports, John Collins made some very interesting comments. And I thought, maybe that's something that we want to chime in on, because, listen, that's his guy, right? And I can't blame him for trying to defend his guy or trying to, give some positives as it relates to his thoughts on Trae Young and the constant comparison, right, to Steph Curry. So John Collins says, quote, I can definitely say for sure that he's a way better playmaker than Steph, and he's a better isolation scorer. But obviously there's different things that he does better and Steph does better. For me, Jarvis, we can stop right there, because you can dig into that one statement alone and break that down and give your thoughts. So let's kind of break that down. First of all, he says, I can definitely say for sure that he's a way better playmaker than Steph, and he's a better isolation scorer. Okay, stop. Playmaker. Go ahead and weigh in on that, because I guess my question would be definition of a playmaker.
Yeah, I think we shouldn't be comparing these. It's not a comparison. Like, it shouldn't even be. We have not reached the point where Trae Young can be compared to Steph Curry. I understand the whole logo threes and all that stuff. Yeah, that's cool and all, but when you're talking about comparison of games, like, I think people don't really understand. Like, Steph Curry is probably one of the best shooters of all time. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like he's in the conversation now. And when you think about him adjusting his game to the NBA, him being a small guard, and teams trying to take advantage of him on the defensive side of the basketball, I don't think Steph Curry gets enough credit for, doing the necessary things in order for them to get to this championship level and be considered a dynasty. I think that all of those, from a leadership standpoint and being willing to motion and move without the basketball in his hands. That's what took his game to a next level.
Yes.
Coming off screens, handoffs, all that stuff.
Backdoor
So,
cuts,
yeah, all of that. That Trae is not willing to do any of that right now, like consistently. So,
Yeah.
that's why I don't really care for this comparison. Now, when you're talking about, handling the rock and getting dimes and all that stuff, and I've seen a stat, they were saying I think he has like over 1,700 points and over 700 assists within the past couple years or so. No other player in the NBA has done that. Yeah, that's all cool. But, like, where has it gotten you, though? Like,
See, and that's right there, guys. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's exactly where my mind was going. Because even if you look at the stats from this season, like, yeah, Trae has more field goals made, but you know what the differential is, Jarvis? Steph Curry has 559, so we'll just call it 560. Trae has 597, 600. If you only have a differential of 40 field goals made, and yet Steph Curry played under 2,000 minutes. Yeah. Trae Young was closing in on 2,600 minutes. That tells you how unbelievably
efficient.
Yes, that Steph Curry can be when he is physically in a game. So when you start talking about playmaker, to me, that's a playmaker or someone who has 49% field goals. It goes to what you just said. 49%. You're efficient, especially when you're shooting 43% from three, when you're looking to Trae's 34, and then you get it done at the charity stripe as well. 91%. That's crazy, crazy, crazy. And I'm going to hit you with something too, Jarvis. You just hit it. We don't talk enough about, and I know I'm using the Encanto reference there, but we don't talk enough about Steph Curry and his rebounding, okay? Because like I said, 600 less minutes of game time, and yet 341 rebounds to 217 rebounds. So again, we don't knock John Collins for obviously uplifting his guy. That's what you are supposed to do.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
You and your guy are in
that's
limbo.
Pretty cool to see, right? Like, all right,
you and your
cool.
guy are in limbo, so we don't really know what's going to happen with either one of you. So, hey, if you want to go ahead and be that guy who supports and lifts up, that's a good thing. But let's be careful, Jarvis. I think this is one where you do want to put the TBD by it and say to be determined. And hey, we don't have to just debate about it here. I am sure when the folks at Locked On Sports Today hear about this type of thing, or really anything as it relates to this NBA play-in and playoff season, you can check them out because they'll give reaction. And Jarvis, I'll be honest with you. I don't doubt that they might give some reaction to Jeff Okuda because acquiring a corner of his stature may be something that those national guys want to talk about as well, coming here to potentially shore up the Falcons secondary. So don't forget, you go to YouTube, check out ATL Day Ones. Yes, you can see our faces and you can hear our voices, of course, wherever you download your podcast. And you can do the same thing for Locked On Sports Today, just like you do for FTC. Go ahead and check them out on what they call Take of the Day. That's Locked On Sports Today.